Welcome to Swala Nyeti, the law podcast that pairs a layman and a lawyer to answer your legal questions of the day. Swala Nyeti is sponsored by the law firm of Kigwata and Company Advocates and is intended for educational purposes only.
Welcome to episode 22 of Swala Nyeti. I am the lawyer, aka Wakili, Harry Karanja, and I am joined here by the layman, Geshao
Hey,
Patrick.
How are you, Wakili?
Very good, Geshao. How are you?
Very fine, thank you.
I know I can't see that. Today it's so dark. I can hardly see your facial expression.
The reason being that they have pulled the curtains in the
Yes.
studio, and you're so far away now. And I must tell you, since I started coming to the studio, I wasn't used to this studio business.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you sit here, put on the microphone.
Yeah.
First, I was astonished how I sound, and then the studio director hiding behind the screen
Yeah.
with his turntable like a DJ, giving instructions by sign language. Anyway, I think it's been a good experience for me to be coming to the studio.
Well, I'm glad. So, what time did you make it this morning?
It
Because
depends.
I came after you.
Considering that we still have our 8 to 5s,
Yeah.
and we have to record every morning. And sometimes I have to be up by 5 to get to the studio at 6.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to see you, and thank you for making the sacrifice. I know there are many people who are happy with the content that you are helping them understand. So
Yeah, and thank you for being the wakili, always ready to answer our questions. Let me tell you, by the way, before you answer the questions, we always think this one we have it. Then the wakil tells us, no, the law doesn't say that. The law says this. We're like,
okay, so let's hear what we have for today. Hopefully we have it as well, or we don't have it.
yeah, we have not had it, so we are not very worried.
All right.
And the question comes from Mwaura.
Mm-hmm.
I own a private school in Embu where I had employed 25 full-time teachers. My school's reputation is very good because of my teachers, and I had spent a lot of time and money training them. When Corona happened, we agreed that they would go on an unpaid leave until school resumed. However, the schools only opened virtually, so I pay them only half the hours they teach and then buy them bundles. My teachers are very good because I train them well, but they are also saying the money is not enough. They now want to work for other schools because virtual classes are only 1 hour a day. I can't afford to pay more, but I can't allow them to work elsewhere. How can I stop them?
All right. So let me see if I understand the problem. We have the owner of a private school who has trained his teachers well, but because of the lockdown of schools, he had to send them on unpaid leave. And now they have resumed some virtual classes, but the amount he's able to pay them is much reduced. And he wants to know if he can prevent these teachers from working in other places, because they claim that what they're earning from the virtual classes is not enough. So he wants to know whether he can stop them from working elsewhere.
Yes, and Maura has a case. The schools are not closed because of his own doing. We are in the middle of a pandemic. The schools have been closed by law from the Ministry of Education. And he has done a lot of work to... These teachers are good because of his effort. And therefore, the teachers to be this ungrateful and to think that they can... Just because he can't afford them now, they can go with all these things he has trained them to do another job for somebody else. For me, doesn't cut it.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying about him having worked hard to train his teachers, but we have to understand that these arrangements are usually governed by employment law and not by property law. So but it looks like to me what Maura really wants to establish is how he can control his employees, even if they're working virtually.
Yes.
But before we get there, we have to find out if they are still his employees, because is this still a contract of service, or has it now become a contract for service?
Wait. Contract of service versus contract for service.
Yes.
Wakili, kindly explain what you mean.
And I thought I was making it easy. So a contract of service is what we commonly refer to as an employment contract. whereas a contract for service is what is usually called an independent contractor.
Independent contractor contract.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Now, in this case, we have to find out whether it's a contract of service or a contract for service. And the reason is because the way they are working, the way Moora is working with the teachers has changed significantly. Now,
What are the determinants then?
okay, so usually there are a few things which we look at to decide whether it's one or the other. When you look at the employment law, that's the first step. And the employment law talks about a time period of 3 months worth of work in order to form a contract of service. So usually a contract of service is established if you're giving someone work which will
Last at least 3 months.
Yes, for at least 3 months. But apart from that, you also look at other tests. Other tests have been established by, in previous cases. For example, who determines the working hours? Who determines where the work is going to be performed? Okay, and if within the contract they actually have an ability, as in this case, to work for more than one person. So if you find that in this case, the person who is establishing all these things or the person who is controlling all these things is the employer, then it's still a contract of service. But if you find that it's the opposite, and
that the employee can determine most of these things.
Exactly, then it could be a contract for service. The other thing is about the working hours. So in an employment contract, the law sets the maximum working hours, which is usually someone work for 6 days and have at least one rest day. But there is no provision in law for the minimum working hours. Now, this means that it's difficult for an employer to enforce a minimum number of working hours.
You said there's no limit on the minimum working hours?
No, there's none.
There's none?
Not in law.
So does that mean that you only require them to work for what, 30 minutes a day? That's okay.
As long as you are meeting all the other requirements under employment law, yeah, there's no problem. That's your agreement.
Then in that case, Mora is meeting at least that because he wants them for 1 hour, and you said he sets the working conditions. He gives them bundles. At least.
Well, if that was all, then maybe that would be okay. But remember, he also mentioned that he sent them on unpaid leave. And now he has changed how he is paying them. He's no longer paying them a monthly sum. Rather, he's paying them for the hours they've worked. And this is why I said we have to see whether the contract which they had has changed, has become a new type of contract.
Because of those... Wow. Anyway, I feel like they're still his employees. I don't know how to explain it. They are his people.
Well, they could still be his employees because I haven't seen anywhere he has issued a notice of termination as required by law.
Wakili, what does the law require?
When it comes to ending a contract or ending an employment contract, if you wanted to do it that there's no notice, the only way that could work is if the employees either agreed to waive the requirement for notice. So they said, okay, we understand things are tough. It's okay. We agree that there's no need for notice and we end it today. Alternatively, you could terminate them under summary dismissal.
Summary dismissal?
Yes.
But man, it's a pandemic. We are not firing them.
Well, summary dismissal would have that effect, but keep in mind that for you to lawfully terminate an employee under summary dismissal, there are quite a number of procedures which you need to follow.
Wakili Len, let's say that the teachers have agreed to waive the notice. How can he still stop them from working for other schools?
Now, this is what is usually referred to as a restrictive covenant, where you prevent an employee, once he has left your employment, from doing similar work with someone else.
Yes.
And the position in law in Kenya is that any such restrictive or any such restraint must be reasonable for it to be enforceable.
And who determines how reasonable it is?
The layman, the ordinary man on the street. But think about this. That's actually the position in law. It's the ordinary man on the street who is used
Me.
as a test. Exactly.
For once.
For once it's you.
For once, it's the layman who determines something in this country.
The test for reasonability
Mm-hmm.
is a test for the times and a test for the circumstances. And of course, you can't codify this in law. You can't codify reasonableness in law.
Okay.
For example, right now we're going through a pandemic, as you've said, and it's unreasonable to try and prevent someone from looking for employment when there's such few employment opportunities
Yeah.
to begin with.
And to look for an income.
Yes, to look for an income. So he might try and have such a covenant, or if he had such a covenant, he could try and enforce it, but it might be seen as unreasonable.
Wow. But I still feel like the teachers should know where their bread is buttered, because once the pandemic is over, and it will be over, they might still need more.
So the bread could be buttered on both sides. Maura could also require the services of these teachers once the schools reopen. What the law requires is that if a contract is to come to an end, there must be a procedure which is followed. If it's going to come to an end without notice, then either the employees need to waive the notice period, or the employer needs to give payment in lieu of notice, or at least notice before the contract is terminated, ensure any arrears are settled, and of course, pay for any unused leave days and any other terminal benefits.
And in that case, then they can sign a new contract, even if they wanted to make it contract for services.
Correct.
Okay, there you have it, Mwaura. First, I commend you for the job you have been doing. I think you and your teachers can come to a win-win situation. And they, as the Wakili has said, you could decide to waive, or they could waive their notice, or you could give them a contract for service. And once the pandemic is over, they could come back to your school and continue with the excellent job. No need to take hard lines. That is my layman's advice to you, Maura. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Swala Nyeti. Join us tomorrow for episode 23. Can you believe it, Wakili? 23. And the question is, can I punish an ex-employee who is poaching my clients and my employees? Can you? And from me, till we meet tomorrow, goodbye.
Goodbye.
You have been listening to Swala Nyeti. Special thanks to our layman, Gashal Patrick, and our lawyer, Harry Karanja. If you have a legal question that you want answered, send us a WhatsApp message on 0708 111 222 or email us at admin@swalanyeti.org. You can find downloads to all our podcast episodes on our website www.swalanyeti.org.